to you, and then I'll begin the formal part of the presentation.
Sounds good. Thanks, Nick. Hello, everyone. Great to be here and great to connect with all of you. As Nick mentioned, my name is Stuart Brown, and I'm the CEO and founder of PICAP. And so PICAP is a venture capital firm, and we're also we have an incubator. And our incubator is a designated entity with the federal government of Canada for the startup visa program. So what we do is invest in companies and bring companies over into our country. We provide a 6-month incubation program to help them get up and running and become successful enterprises that adds to the Canadian economy.
Great. Jeffrey, just like to introduce yourself. That'd be great.
Thank you. Well, my name is Jeffrey Crocker. Thank you very much for having us here today, Nick. I'll be able to answer a whole bunch of questions for you today on sort of the Canadian legal and business environment, but by background, I'm a lawyer based in downtown Toronto. Our focus is primarily on corporate and business law. So we help businesses from the incorporation stage right through to the operations stage and help them advise on everything from hiring employees to your contracts to your business structures to make you tax efficient. And we bring together a series of other services in our firm to sort of pull together all the things that folks that are coming to Canada need when they're starting a business, in the sense of banking relationships, government services relationships, and accounting relationships, so that you can take advantage of our very favorable tax environment here. So I look forward to sharing with you more of that in a minute, and I'll turn it back to Nick.
Thanks so much, Jeffrey. I'm going to start the formal part of tonight's webinar. And as you have questions, which I'm sure many of you will, please write in the comments section below, and we'll try to leave some room tonight for questions and get to them. So just a quick disclaimer before we begin tonight's presentation. I am a registered Canadian immigration consultant. I'm regulated by the federal government of Canada to process immigration files and give immigration advice. In terms of tonight's agenda, we obviously began with introductions in terms of what everyone does. I'm going to give a brief update in terms of what's happening with Canadian immigration, currently the current immigration environment. Second, we're going to talk about what is Canadian business immigration, how to understand it. Then I'm going to briefly touch on the common strategies associated with, moving one's business to Canada or making an investment into Canada. And then we're going to focus primarily on one of Canada's flagship business immigration programs, the Startup Visa Program. And that's something that Beaver Immigration, as an immigration consultancy firm, specializes in. It's something that Stuart Brown's incubator in Toronto helps facilitate, and a number of Jeffrey's clients with Civis Law helps guide through. And from there, the panel is just going to have a general conversation on the current Canadian business landscape. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions. Now, before I go any further, I just want to let the audience know Canadian business immigration can get complicated. So I know people are going to have a lot of questions and things may seem complicated and these concepts may seem foreign. That's okay. That's what we're here for, and we're going to try to keep things at a very high level for the audience tonight. But the good news is, in terms of Canada being open for business and open to immigrant entrepreneurs and investors, if you go home this evening with one message, Canada is open to immigrants, okay? Just last month, earlier this month, in February, the government announced that in 2021, last year, Canada set a record for admitting 405,000 permanent residents. As part of that, they also released their 3-year plan to admit a further 1.3 million new permanent residents. So the quota for 2022, this year, is 431,000 new permanent residents. This also includes business investors. So if there's one message that I'd like to deliver loud and clear to all the participants in tonight's discussion is Canada is wide open for immigration and welcoming new Canadians. So if you're thinking about making this move for commercial success and moving your family, now is the time. So it's really important to understand that business immigration is a key pillar of the immigration system overall. And that's really demonstrated in the Act itself. The first pillar of the Immigration Act is the safety and security of Canadians. And the second is to support a strong and prosperous economy. Why is this important to appreciate is Canada always puts entrepreneurs and investors at the front of the line, or in terms of making them a priority when it comes to immigration. Now, why does Canada promote business immigration? Well, it brings billions of dollars into the Canadian economy. 80% of the tax base is composed of small, medium-sized enterprises. Entrepreneurs and business owners and operators create jobs and it drives innovation, helps boost trade. Something that Jeffrey is going to talk about further and hopefully answer a lot of your questions is, why do businesses, why do foreign companies, why do foreign investors come to Canada? And Jeffrey will talk about the stable economy and government, our solid banking system, rule of law, preservation of capital and a currency hedge, the ease of access to the U.S. market, and for some companies, the opening to the Far East market in Asia. But Jeffrey will speak more to this. So let's understand business immigration at a very high level. There's a lot of moving parts to business immigration, okay? The first thing we need to understand when we're looking at any business immigration program, especially when Beaver is consulting with the client, is can the client meet the eligibility requirements of any visa program, okay? There's language tests involved. Do you have a solid business plan? Do you have the necessary funds? Are you in a position to create Canadian jobs? Do you meet the investment requirements, right? The second thing we need to nail down is the business strategy. Are you planning to bring an existing business to Canada? Do you plan to start a new business in Canada? Something that Stuart at PICAP helps entrepreneurs do, or do you plan to transfer an existing business? And the third thing is that Beaver excels at is choosing the right immigration strategy. Essentially, which visa program are we going to choose? Are we going to select work permits? Are we going to go through the provincial route? Or are we going to choose a federal program? So there's dozens of different visa programs, schemes that the Canadian immigration system allows. I wish I could go through all of them, but unfortunately we don't have time for that, as that would require dozens of webinars. But there's essentially 4 traditional pathways that entrepreneurs and business owners take to enter Canada. The first is the intercompany transfer, something that Beaver Immigration here in South Africa sees a lot of. The second and most popular route, traditionally, is provincial nomination programs. That is investing in a particular province in Canada. The third, which we're seeing more and more of, is a significant benefit work program. But by and large, the most popular one is what we call the Startup Visa Program, which is the federal government of Canada's flagship investor program for immigrant entrepreneurs. This is what Stuart, Jeffrey, and myself work on, and which we'd like to focus on. But before that, let's quickly look at the intercompany transfer process, because we get a lot of questions on this. At a very high level, the intercompany transfer process is very simple, but the devil's is in the details, I can assure you. ICT is very simple at a high level. First, we register a company in Canada, okay, that's affiliated to the parent country and the country of origin. We apply for work permits. The employer for national works for a couple of years, and they apply for a permanent residence, okay? Sounds simple enough, but it gets a little bit more complicated than that. To be eligible for an intercompany transfer, it's really only, it can't be for any employee. It's really only for executives or senior managers or specialized workers, okay? The important thing to remember for a foreign company to be eligible for an intercompany transfer is it must demonstrate that it has the financial net worth or financial capacity to support the company in Canada. It has to own at least 51% of the company. It must have been in existence for at least 12 months, and it must be operational, okay? The second thing is to transfer the employee must have been part of the foreign company for at least 12 months. They must have some type of specialized knowledge, or they must be a director or an executive, okay? Now, again, the intercompany transfer, it sounds simple, but there are a lot of moving parts to it. So please contact our office if you'd like further information on it. The second and most commonly known pathway into Canada is through the provincial nomination programs. Each province in Canada, whether it's British Columbia, Manitoba, or Ontario, has its own investor programs, so we call provincial programs. Now, we don't have time to go through each of these programs, but essentially, all of these programs have the four common characteristics. There's a minimum net worth requirement for each applicant, which can range anywhere between $600,000 to $1 million Canadian. There's investment requirements, okay, where the applicant is required to put in a capital investment of anywhere between $200,000 to $800,000, depending on which province you're in. There must be an overall business plan. The applicant must commit to creating at least one Canadian job. And essentially the way these programs work is the applicant has a proposal to buy an existing company or an idea for a new company. They engage the province. They're admitted entry through work permits, and they have 2 years to come in to start the business. If they're successful in terms of getting the business off the ground, then they can apply for permanent residency. If you have any questions on the provincial nomination program, please contact Beaver Immigration. Another common pathway into Canada is what we call the Significant Benefit Work Permit, or C11. This is a lesser known pathway into Canada, but it's worth mentioning, especially in the South African market. We have very innovative people. Essentially, you start a business in Canada, it becomes operational, you hire people, the company's operating, then you make an application to apply for a work permit for you to start working for that company. But the key is you first build the company in Canada, it's operating, and then you apply for it. We don't typically see a lot of applications for this pathway into Canada. However, in the South African market, what we do see a lot of demand for is the Startup Visa Program. And really what we're here to talk about today, and it is the only federal visa program for permanent residency under the business class. What is the Startup Visa Program? Well, the Startup Visa program, in a nutshell, is simply this. It was designed to target immigrant entrepreneurs with the skills and potential to build businesses in Canada that are innovative, can create Canadian jobs, and compete on a global scale. Okay, so what does that mean? What's this all about? What's this program designed to do? Well, the Startup Visa program was designed in 2015. What the Canadian government wanted to do was find entrepreneurs and innovators around the world who had really innovative ideas, but perhaps were not in the right markets, okay? And they wanted to attract them to come to Canada and potentially maybe be the next unicorn, okay? So they created this program, okay? And they made it very broad, okay? With very few criteria, okay? As opposed to the other business immigration programs we discussed. And really, the only 4 requirements for eligibility for this program for immediate permanent residency into the visa program are as follows. Each applicant for this program must hold at least 10% of the voting rights of the company, okay? Each applicant must meet the language requirements of a Canadian language benchmark 5. Essentially, that means you have to write an English test and score CLB 5, which in roundabout terms, that means you basically have to pass the English test. You have to have enough settlement funds to enter Canada. What does that mean? That means for a family of 2, you have to demonstrate that you have around 250,000 Rand in your bank account to enter Canada. And the 4th criteria, in order to be eligible for this visa for immediate permanent residence into the country, was obtain a letter of support and commitment certificate from a business incubator that's being confirmed as a designated organization. Well, what does this mean? What's a designated organization? What's a letter of support? What's a commitment certificate? What's going on here? Well, when the federal government designed this program in order to attract really innovative companies, they fully appreciated that the visa officer sitting somewhere in Canada probably didn't know what the next potential Airbnb could be, or an application for blockchain chain technology, or what the next, killer app would be, or consumer packaged good would be. So they approached venture capital firms, they approached angel investors, and they approached Canadian business incubators, just like the one Stuart Brown, who we're going to speak to momentarily, run. And they said to them, immigrant entrepreneurs will approach you with their ideas for a startup business in Canada. And if you feel the business is innovative, has the potential to create Canadian jobs, can scale up globally, we would like you to invite them to Canada to start working on their idea. And we will invite them through a letter of support and commitment certificate. In addition, the business incubator will provide them support to scale up their business. Okay. So I'm going to end the formal part of the presentation. I know I've thrown a lot at the audience, but Stuart, maybe you can just kind of hop on here and talk about kind of the, the SUV kind of in your own words, how PICAP processes, applications for its incubation, how you support entrepreneurs.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very happy to go over that. So the essence of the Startup Visa program, essentially, if you look at it from the perspective of the Canadian government and why they created this, is really to bring the best minds and innovation into our country, as Nick, you touched on. So I like to kind of emphasize to those considering this avenue as a means to immigrate to Canada that the Canadian economy has a lot to gain from all of you coming here. So I know that a lot of entrepreneurs who are going through this whole application process get a little bit anxious. You know, they want to make the best impression to a designated organization like PICAP. They want to make sure they work with you, Nick, to make their application the best quality application possible. But it's always good to keep in mind that the Canadian economy really needs entrepreneurs like those of you listening in on this event right now. And that's because the Canadian economy is so heavily centered on natural resources which have a finite life cycle, whereas innovation, entrepreneurship, that makes up about 70% of the employment in Canada, small businesses. So it makes a lot of sense that the Canadian government wants to support small business entrepreneurship, but also attract people who are going to start companies here and create those innovative products. Because our population is quite small, hence the whole reason why we're opening up the doors. And if you look at some of our biggest, most successful companies, Shopify, started by Toby Lutke, Ethereum, I'm sure most of you have heard of Ethereum or the Ether cryptocurrency. It's one of the most valuable next to Bitcoin. Also Wattpad and a slew of other examples. They were all started by immigrant entrepreneurs. Like you look at Shopify, that's one of the most successful, valuable companies in our country. It was recently valued at $233 billion. That was started by a guy who immigrated to Canada and started this amazing platform and stayed in Canada. So just consider the value that is bringing to the Canadian economy as well. And the thing that really differentiates PICAP among other designated organizations is that we're an incubator that's being run by venture capitalists who have the perspective of making investments and managing portfolio companies and being laser focused on partnering with those companies to make sure that the companies meet milestones and increase shareholder value into perpetuity, or at least until there's an exit. The other thing that makes PICAP unique is that we're very much connected to the biggest business schools in the country, the Schulich School of Business and the University of Toronto. So those are the top ranking business schools. And we teach courses there related to venture capital, private equity, corporate finance, entrepreneurship. So when we bring companies into our incubator, of course, we're very much focused on making the applicants successful with their immigration. That's first and foremost. But secondly, we're hyper focused on making your company successful and allow it to grow in the most efficient, fastest way possible. So you too could be the next Toby Lutke from Shopify, or Vitalik Buterin from Ethereum, another immigrant entrepreneur into Canada, or Alan Lau from Wattpad. Amazing unicorn companies that have all come from immigrants.
Stuart, that's fantastic. Stuart, can you maybe let some of the listeners know what type of companies apply to PICAP? What type of businesses, industries are you looking for?
So with our incubator, we're industry agnostic. The main thing that we look for in companies is we ask ourselves, is this applicant going to be successful with their package when they send it to IRCC? So we want to make sure that if we're going to approve a company into our incubator, they are well positioned to be successful in terms of their immigration. So that's basically the key thing for us. And to meet the requirements for IRCC, you have to have some innovative element to your company. So a lot of people automatically assume, rightfully so, that it's something related to technology, software, hardware, but that doesn't mean that there isn't innovation within other business models that aren't in the tech sector. So literally any type of company we could accept into our program as long as it meets the minimum requirements of IRCC and they have something innovative within their business model.
And IRCC being Canada's immigration ministry. Stuart, can you walk us through what the application process looks like at a very high level? How does somebody apply to start a visa program?
Sure. Okay, so as you mentioned, they have to first get a letter of support from a designated organization. So with PICAP, what they need to do is go on to our website, picap.com, and navigate to the application page for our startup visa program. It's a very quick little initial intake form, and that allows the applicant to get into our system. Then we will get back in touch with them with a request for further information and documents, and we'll invite them for an interview. We'll meet all of the team members who are looking to come to Canada, and then we will make an assessment on the business and then provide the letter of support if the applicant is successful.
Okay. Now, Stuart, before I transition over to Jeffrey, who's going to talk a little bit at a higher level about Canadian business, Canadian business landscape, I do have a question here that's come in. Does the company that applies to the business incubator, can it be an existing business, or does it have to be completely brand new?
Yeah, of course, it can be an existing business. One of the things that we look for when we accept companies into our incubators, how much traction do they have in the market? And so on the high end of the spectrum, if it's an existing business with revenue coming into the company, I mean, that's the best indication of all that there is traction in the market. If it's a startup and they don't have revenue, they should have some form of proof to us that they've engaged the customer segment that they're looking to sell into. For example, maybe they've demoed their prototype and they've got positive feedback from their customer segment. That would be applicable as well.
Okay, good stuff. Now, I have some questions for Jeffrey, who again is a commercial lawyer in Toronto. Now, I should have prefaced at the start when I was talking about Canadian business immigration, and this is something really important for the audience to know. And again, I'll stress my role as a licensed Canadian immigration practitioner is to navigate clients through Canadian business immigration. And what does that mean? We essentially do the paperwork. We walk people through the programs. But it's important to understand the Canadian government's philosophy when it comes to business immigration. The way the Canadian government feels and thinks about business immigration is that entrepreneurs, business owners, your priority and your intention is to come and trade in Canada. Okay? The work permits, the permanent residency, and your status is almost secondary. It comes along with that. Why do I say that? One of the most important things in Canadian business immigration is to show intent that you plan to come to Canada. You're going to register a company. You're going to invest money. You're going to hire people. You're going to trade. You're going to innovate. You're going to do all those fantastic things that Stuart talked about. And somebody like Jeffrey Crocker, who's a lawyer in Canada, is going to help you do that by incorporating, by explaining to you how the rules of the road work. So Jeffrey, I'd like to start by asking you a question as a commercial lawyer. Why do foreign companies choose Canada as a destination compared to other countries?
Thank you. So Nick, it's a great question that we've been blessed in Canada by a number of folks who have come over. I know Stuart talked about it on the immigration side of things. One of the things that I find that foreign entrepreneurs like about Canada are a few things. One is the stability of the economy and the stability of the country itself. The Canadian government, just to give some folks some background, is not dissimilar to the South African model in the sense that you have a federal system and then you have states, or in the case of Canada, provinces, and 10 provinces and 3 territories. Each of them have certain rules of operating, But the bottom line is that the rule of law is an extremely sacrosanct principle in how business is conducted. Businesses in Canada, if you are coming here as a business person, you have a legal obligation to conduct business in good faith, and that creates an air of stability that when you're talking business to business conversations, that you have a duty to operate in good faith, which means the concerns around corruption and issues of perhaps graft, bakshish, as they would say in the Middle East, become less of an issue here in Canada because of the rules are very, very strong. And for private companies, the other great thing that really draws folks here is, depending on how you structure the companies, there is a degree of confidentiality and neutrality that comes with that. So when you create these corporate entities, you're really properly isolating your liability and your risk within that corporate entity, providing you follow the rules. And then, of course, one of the best reasons why folks like to come to Canada is the tax system and the tax regime. Within the Canadian confines, the federal tax level for corporations in Canada is 15%, which is an extremely competitive tax regime. And of course, each province also has its own corporate tax rate. So the marginal tax rates might be a bit higher, but compared to the United States, compared to even places in Europe, it's an extremely competitive environment. And then adding to that, how you choose to run expenses and business expenses through your business provides you a very tax efficient way to build a business. And then, of course, that all adds in that if you're here and you're in it for the long run, if you are actually looking to actually create a business and build a business here in Canada, the capital gains exemptions themselves are significant. So if you were to build a successful business and sell it at some point later on, in Canada right now, the first $900,000 of value when you sell your business is tax-free. That's a lifetime capital gains exemption. So if you sell two businesses, one business for $400,000 and $1 billion for $500,000, in the sense of its increased value, that capital gains exemption becomes an extremely competitive an important tax advantage for picking Canada as a jurisdiction. And Nick, one other thing I'll add in is, perhaps I'll get a little philosophical. I love Canada. I've actually had a chance to travel to South Africa and I've seen the beauty of your country. I think there are things that our countries share, both in the sense of our constitutional principles. Canada played a big role in helping in the development of South Africa's current constitution in the post-apartheid era. But the vast expanses of space, I think that is something that our countries share. So in the sense, when you're coming here, if you want an urban lifestyle, you can have an urban lifestyle. If you want to be in the middle of nowhere and not see another human being for 3 days at a time, you can do that as well. And it's one of the great things about this country is its vast expanses and such amazing cities across the country that give you a different flair or flavor for how you want to conduct your business and how you operate.
Okay, fantastic. Now, Jeffrey, I did have another question for you.
Please.
This is something you and I need to have a discussion about, because it's something I talk to clients about. How easy is it as a foreign national with no status in Canada to register and incorporate a company in Canada? In other words, can you start doing business in Canada tomorrow?
So the process is actually quite simple to create, and the way I describe it, folks, and I think folks in South Africa will appreciate coming from a common law jurisdiction. When you incorporate a business, you are essentially, in the law, a business is a person. So businesses are people. So when you incorporate a business, you're giving birth to a new legal person, even though it's a business, and that becomes an alter ego. So it is very simple for the businesses to operate in Canada, and recent changes in legislation in Canada have even allowed businesses to incorporate without the need of a Canadian director. So it used to be up until recently that you had to have a Canadian director on your board in order to operate. And that is the case in some provinces still, as well as at the federal level if you incorporate federally, but there are a bunch of provinces where we can incorporate you within certain provincial jurisdictions. And that's another thing that Nick can explain to you. You have the federal level of government where you can have a federal incorporation, which is easier and cheaper, but requires a Canadian director and requires a lot more annual reporting and is more public, versus a provincial incorporation where you can incorporate in the province of Ontario, let's say. You can still do business across Canada, but the provincial incorporation is a bit more confidential. Stuff is less public, but also does not require a Canadian director. Now, one of the things that we do when you come here is the ability to open a business is easy as a foreigner, and especially if you're offshore, but the ability to conduct the business in the country may be where you need assistance. And that's one of the things that we provide as a law firm as well, is we provide resident Canadian director services that will help you establish bank accounts where we use our good name and our connections, similar to what PICAP does, with the incubator. You're essentially hitching yourself to the reputation and good word of that person to open doors for you. And we like to do the same thing. And we know that going through the process with Nicholas, that you're going to be vetted very carefully, because Nicholas is not going to put you through a process that doesn't require you to be vetted. So once you have gone through that sort of vetting process to get your applications and your paperwork ready, we then can assist both as a law firm and as business advisors on sort of navigating you through all of the various things you have to think about. Like, it's not just about incorporation. You have to get a tax number. You have to register with the tax authorities. You have to get a bank account, and all of those things that are required to go along with it. And while it's time consuming, and often you'll hear in this process, the incorporation game is a bit of a game of hurry up and wait. There's a rapid influx of activity, and then there's a period of quiet. And that is often sort of the nature of business in general. But once you're up and running, it's a great place to do business.
So Jeffrey, something I tell clients in consultations, when I do interviews here in South Africa, there is nothing stopping a foreign national from conducting business in Canada. Somebody
Correct.
can contact a lawyer, just like Jeffrey from Civis Law, and register a company. You're going to have to jump through a couple of hurdles, but you will get that business account open. You can wire money over. You can hire employees. You can open up your place of business. You can start importing products and selling. The only issue is you cannot work for that company. You can collect the profits and dividends and repatriate them to your home country, but you have no status in that country. And that's what
Correct.
Beaver Immigration helps with. We get you your status in Canada, okay? And through programs like the Startup Visa program, where we work very carefully with, closely with PICAP and Stewart's Incubator, we can achieve that, all right? So Stuart, transitioning back to you, as an immigration consultant, one thing that attracts me to the Startup Visa program is there's no investment requirement associated with this visa. There's no education requirements. There's no personal net worth requirements. There's no performance guarantee associated with this visa program. Essentially, the government is interested in the innovation. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, that is absolutely correct. There are startup visa programs in other countries, but one of the things that makes Canada unique is that some of these other countries, like what I'm hearing about the UK or the US, there might be a startup visa program, but you only get your work permit, and that's kind of where it ends. And there's also possible requirements for the business to be successful. Whereas you touched on, Nick, what's unique about Canada is that you're not required to make your company successful, but you also touched on the intent being important. So that is an important element at the onset. And in Canada, of course, you can get your permanent residency. So you can become a Canadian citizen, which is amazingly attractive to so many people. And that's why we've had over 500 applicants over the last 12 months, just because the popularity of this program, this country, and then of course, PICAP as well is gaining so much exposure that we're getting just inundated with opportunities.
So Stuart, we had a question on social media come through the day before, and it basically, the gist of it was, if my company fails through the startup visa program, will I be deported?
No, that is not. Once you get your permanent residency, I mean, I'm not the immigration consultant, but
Okay.
from my perspective, you're good to go. So you should, though, do everything you can possible to make your company successful, especially when you're waiting for your PR to be approved. But after you get the PR, if your company ends up failing, you're not going to get deported. Unless it fails for some reason related to terrorism or drug dealing, which of course you wouldn't probably get through the system anyways if that was the case. But yeah.
Okay. So in terms of just finishing off here in the last 5-10 minutes, I'd like to have a group discussion. As you know, I'm in South Africa, helping South Africans immigrate to Canada, but you're in Toronto. And we're coming out of this global pandemic. What is the current business environment in Canada? What are you guys seeing? What can you tell our guests tonight in terms of the business environment? Are things back up and running? What's going on back home, guys?
Sure, I could jump in with that. Things are really on an upswing, to be honest. Like ground level, in the private sector, in the VC space, we're seeing amazing traction within companies within our portfolio and elsewhere. And just an example of that, 2 years ago, we started a company called ChargerQuest, and within 48 months, the company had raised over $4 million in financing and was valued at $20 million. And we're looking to take the company public Q2 of this year. And this is a company that's in the electric vehicle infrastructure space. So you might think, okay, well, COVID-19, lockdown, no one's traveling. A company like this is doomed, but that's definitely not the case. There's so much activity and interest happening from potential partnerships, customers, investors, because we all know that the economy is going to be improving substantially within the very near future. And everybody is more than eager to get on board with that.
Nick,
Jeff?
I think it's safe to say within the Canadian business environment right now that, look, I think it's fair to say the global economy around the world is recovering from COVID. There is a mad rush for folks to get back out again. Obviously, there are inflationary pressures globally because of what's happened with government. So if we're looking at a broader economic issue, there are two possibilities on the horizon. Good news and bad news. I think in the Canadian case, our dollar is extremely stable because of Canada's oil reserves. Given the current situations that are happening globally, our dollar is very strong. I know that's not necessarily good comfort to South Africans, because I know sometimes your currency suffers against the Canadian or US dollar. But one of the other things that we see is that as the US economy comes back to life, so does the Canadian economy. So adding that you've got a significant resource economy in Canada with oil and natural resources, which keeps the dollar relatively strong. You have great global connections. Air Canada from a global airline perspective is great, and then you have access to the US markets. But one of the other things that I think that also shows how good the business environment is across Canada, each of the provincial governments has a different sort of political party and power, ranging from right to left, moderate right to moderate left. Canada's political spectrum is pretty center, and even at the federal level, there is an extreme desire to support small businesses and to support startups. There's a viewpoint in Canada that the number of people that are going into business for themselves is growing dramatically, the great resignation, if you will. And there's a viewpoint that as a Canadian government, you want to create the supports and create the economic environment to do business. And Nick, if I can, there's a couple of questions that have been put into the meeting chat that I wouldn't mind addressing if it's possible.
Sure. I think there's a question here I'll quickly read them out. There's a question about if we take an existing business from South Africa to Canada, do we have to pay tax in both countries? So I'm not going to touch that question because I'm a Canadian living in South Africa. There could be somebody from the South African Revenue Service on this. So I'll leave it to Jeffrey or Stuart to answer this.
So look, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask. So Denver Nadu has asked that question. So there's the corporation side and then there's the personal side. So of course, as a corporation, you're going to have, your corporate tax obligations, and it ultimately boils down to where corporations are domiciled and also whether there is a tax treaty. So one of the things that Canada has been very aggressive about globally, and including with South Africa, are tax treaties. So this is where, as a law firm, we would bring in our accounting experts to assist you, but there are tax treaties in place both at the corporate and provincial level, the corporate federal, corporate provincial, as well as personal level, that mitigates the risk of double taxation and how you report it. So this becomes an important part, is that when you're transitioning your business over, sort of creating subsidiaries versus sister companies and when you can assign rights to it. And there may be a period of time while you're waiting for the visa programs that you have two corporations where you are paying tax in two jurisdictions because they're operating independently. But once you make the move over and you're approved for the immigration side of things, then you can extract the value, the IT assets, etc., out of that corporation, wind that down, and re-domicile it into your Canadian corp, as well as a host of other tax strategies. I won't give tax advice because that's what the accountants get paid for. But suffice it to say, on the personal income tax side, it's important to note that there are tax treaties in place that contemplate this exact issue, and it will save you the double taxation issue.
Okay. Stuart, I have a question here from Steph. She says, where do SMEs fit into this? Are they really entrepreneurs?
Oh, you're on mute,
Sure.
Stuart.
Oh yeah. Thanks. Thanks for that. It's got to happen every meeting in this new era we're living in. So small to medium-sized enterprises, yes, they qualify as entrepreneurs. As touched on earlier, if a company is already up and running and it has traction in the market, it's generating revenue, that would actually make the company and the application much stronger even. The thing is that the companies need to just meet that innovative requirement. As long as they have something innovative within their business model, within their product, within their service, or just how they do things, then it could qualify.
Okay, so I guess I should add to that. Being here as a Canadian in South Africa, I've helped bring South African companies to Canada through PICAP and Stuart. And the truth is, Stuart can attest to this, we have taken existing companies that have a very strong balance sheet, but have a very new innovative idea and technology that they wanted to introduce into the Canadian market. They want to bring it through a developed market. At the extreme opposite end of the scale, we have entrepreneurs who just have an idea. Okay, obviously it's not on the back of a napkin. They put in a lot of thought to it. They've invested into a technological prototype. They bring it up to what we call the market value proposition. But again, it's really about the idea and the innovation. Okay, and one thing I would stress, and something Stuart always stresses to me, is that the startup visa should not be confused as an intercompany transfer. Okay, which this visa program always gets confused for. So I think it's fair to say your first port of call, if you're thinking about business immigration, especially in the South African market, is to contact Beaver Immigration. We're getting close to that 7 p.m. local time here in South Africa, and I think we're going to be wrapping up. I think we've answered most of the questions in the chat. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to contact Beaver Immigration. You can go to our website at www.beaverimmigration.com or contact us at info@beaverimmigration.com. We can set up a consultation, send us your questions. We'd be more than happy to answer you. I'm getting a message here. We have 2 more questions. Can you please just wait? Kirsten, do you want to read those questions out to us? Okay, she's saying it's info@beaverimmigration.com.
Okay, sorry, I'm here. All right. Starting a business in Canada, for example, waste management, what personal knowledge or certifications do I need to be able to qualify apart from having the funds?
Jeffrey,
Stuart,
why don't you take the waste management question?
Absolutely, I can. There are 3 qualifications you need to run a business in Canada. 1, tenacity. 2, your willingness to pay your taxes on time to the government when they collect them, and 3, and a proper incorporation. When it comes to any kind of business, unless it's a certified professional, accountants, lawyers, actuarial services, etc., that require a license, the short answer is you don't need any other qualification. You may need to join a trade group or a trade association, and they might put you through some professional development exercises. But if you have an idea that you want to collect on something, and move forward with, it's an open business environment here, and again, short of regulated professions, everything else then may just be an industrial relations component. Sorry, it's not industrial relations, an industry association component. But that's also something where I'll defer to Stuart on this. That's where the incubators are so good at the business advice side of things and helping guide you towards that decision.
Yeah, that's definitely an accurate response. So what we look for is a team that has a background in the type of business that they're looking to start in Canada. So we're not expecting for the applicants to already be certified in whatever association or regulatory body in the country here, because of course you haven't even arrived yet. But if you are presenting a company to us and we're looking at it and we think, okay, there should be some certification involved here, as long as you're aware of it and you have a plan on how to get it, that should be sufficient proof to us for you to be applicable for our incubator.
Okay, gentlemen, there is one last question from David Urka, and this is a great question. The question is, do you have a team or resource to help fine-tune our innovative ideas product to cater for the startup initiative and help link us? David, the answer to that question is yes. And
you're talking to the team right now.
You're talking to the team. Your first protocol is Beaver Immigration and Civis Law. Before you make your application to the startup visa program, there are a lot of things there's a lot of work. Your business plan, your incorporation, making sure you've done your market research. This is not something you just jump into within 24, 48 hours. Please contact us at info@Beaver Immigration. We'll share more info with you. But really the purpose of this webinar was to provide the audience with a high-level overview of how the program works in terms of the startup visa and how Canadian business immigration works as a whole. And I think we're just at the 7 p.m. mark here, local time. I am going to have to cut things off. A sincere thank you to Mr. Stuart Brown and Jeffrey from Toronto. I've known these gentlemen for a very long time. I did my schooling with them many years ago in Toronto. So I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, both for making time, again, for the South African market, as there is a lot of talent in this market, and there's definitely a need to export this talent abroad. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great, thanks,
Nick.
Nick.
We hope to see you all very soon in Canada, and don't let anyone tell you that it's too cold to come here. It's a beautiful place.